When talking about nutrition and fat loss, many people say that insulin is the bad guy. But is this true? Is insulin the bad guy? In this video we're going to figure out exactly that. And stay tuned until the end because we're going to give some recommendations if you have your insulin too high. Hi to everyone, I am Tommy. I'm a human nutrition student and researcher at the university, and today we're going to talk about insulin. Because in the community of low carb and ketogenic diets, it's very common to say that insulin is bad for us and we don't want to spike the insulin. Let's start viewing what insulin is. Insulin is a hormone that our body produces, in concrete our pancreas. The beta cells in the Langerhans islets in our pancreas, the endocrine pancreas, creates this hormone called insulin that is released every time the blood glucose levels raise. So, for example, after a meal high in carbohydrates, the glucose levels raise and insulin is released. Why? Because insulin has the role to put that glucose, that excess of glucose in the blood inside the tissues. It's very important. It's like a key. It's like a key for the cells to accept the glucose. Without insulin, that glucose could not enter some tissues. They use the GLUT4 transporter, and GLUT4 transporter is insulin dependent. So as you can see, insulin is very, very important for us. On the other hand, when glucose levels are very low, we have the counter hormone of insulin, the direct counter hormone, which is the glucagon. Glucagon is secreted by the alpha cells in the Langerhans islets of the pancreas. And it raises glucose levels via gluconeogenesis. It stimulates the degradation of the glycogen in the liver to raise those glucose levels in the bloodstream. But glucagon is not alone. We have many other hormones and molecules that can raise our glucose levels in the blood. These are the non-direct counter hormones of insulin, such as cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. We release cortisol when we are stressed and we feel angry, and those situations are going to raise our blood glucose levels. And in situations when we are walking out, running and exercising in general, there is a raise of the glucose levels via cortisol. And then we have the catecholamines such as adrenaline and noradrenaline that can sort of affect the blood glucose levels because they drive the glucose to the muscles, to the tissues, to create energy very quickly and in the glycolysis, because they stimulate the fight or flight system, the nervous system, in which we are going to use a lot of energy, quick energy, spontaneous one, because we need to either run or fight or flight. Basically, when, for example, we see a lion and we are afraid of it and we need to run very fast, adrenaline is going to degrade the glycogen we have in the muscle tissues to create glucose, and from glucose do the glycolysis to obtain energy. And that energy we are going to use it to run. But in some way it can also drive the glucose we have stored in our liver and move it to the blood and from the blood to the tissues, and that stimulates the catabolic state in which we degrade the glycogen to obtain the energy. So as you can see, we have two main groups in which one is the insulin, which is the hypoglycemic hormone. It lowers the blood glucose levels. And then we have the group of the hypoglycemic hormones that they raise the glucose levels in the bloodstream. Having those two groups, we must have a balance between them, so our glucose levels in the blood maintain a normal range that's between 70 to 110. In some literature they say even 60 to 100, but more or less it's between 70 to 110 milligrams of glucose per liter of blood. Out of this range, if it goes below, we have the hyperglycemic hormones. If it goes too high, we have insulin. But wait a second, why do we have only one hormone, which is hypoglycemic, the insulin, and a few that can raise the blood glucose levels? Isn't it interesting? I think it is. What I want you to know is that having too little glucose in the blood is risky, but it's even worse when we have too much. Because here's the thing, if we have too little, we can still generate glucose from, for example, the amination of proteins. So with that we can raise that glucose level, but when we have too much glucose, then we have a huge problem, because we only have one hypoglycemic hormone, insulin. And if we are insulin resistant, then there's nothing we can do really. Insulin resistance is when we need more insulin to get the same amount of glucose inside the cells. And it happens for two reasons. One is that the cell is already full of glucose and it doesn't need more. And two, because insulin starts to lose its power. It's not effective as it was before. And the insulin resistance is in fact the pre-diabetes step. Some doctors call it the diabetes type 3. So now you can understand why in the ketogenic low-carb community a lot of people are afraid of insulin spikes, because multiple insulin spikes are going to create insulin resistance. And then if you look at the metabolism, well, we see that insulin is secreted more and more to get the job done of letting glucose get inside the tissue, and that's promoting the anabolic state, because insulin is an anabolic hormone. Indeed, in this group, the hypoglycemic one is the anabolic one, and the others, the hyperglycemic ones, are the catabolic ones. Because to raise the blood glucose levels, we need to degrade, to catabolize, to get in the catabolic state of some tissues, some molecules, to create glucose and raise the blood glucose levels. In the anabolic one, we already have that glucose, and we get the glucose inside the tissue to create new things, to create energy, and promoting the protein synthesis, but also, unfortunately, the fat accumulation, because anabolism is not only the anabolism of one thing. In general terms, if we do anabolic reactions, they are generally linked together. So protein synthesis and energy creation is also followed by some energy accumulation in form of fat. I don't think we need to condemn insulin. We don't have to point the finger at insulin, because I don't think insulin is the bad guy. And this is the answer to the question at the beginning of the video. Insulin is the bad guy? No. Insulin is our friend. We only need to know when to spike our insulin and why. So when it's beneficial to spike our insulin. If we want to build muscle, for example, it's very beneficial to spike our insulin because that's promoting the anabolic state, the protein synthesis. And that's going to create more muscle. That's why so many bodybuilders nowadays inject not testosterone anymore, but insulin, because it's even cheaper. Anyway, but be careful, because too many spikes of insulin will lead us to prediabetes, which is insulin resistance. Remember that. On the other hand, if we want to lose weight, then chances are the catabolic hormones are the preferred ones. And so to keep insulin low is better for us. Keeping insulin low will also get us to eat less frequently. When we start in hypoglycemic state, we tend to feel hungry. And that's why so many people in the fitness community, they eat like 8 times a day and they feel hungry all the time. Why is that? Because they spike their insulin every time they eat. And they do it very frequently. And those spikes, when they drop below the optimal levels and we feel hungry again. I hope you understand how it works. So when we want to build muscles, a little bit of spikes of insulin, maybe 2 spikes a day after the workout, for example, is very beneficial. If we want to prioritize our fat loss, keeping insulin down is the best way to go. I hope you understood the whole concept. And now the bonus. So what to do if in my blood work I have insulin too high? Too high means more than 5 milligrams fasted. That's a sign of metabolic dysfunction. It's a clear sign that there is a problem in our metabolism and we need to fix it. How? Well, try to spike your insulin less frequent during the day. That means to reduce the amount of carbohydrates we eat during the day and also the number of meals. For example, if you are eating carbohydrates with high glycemic index at every meal 5 times a day, well, just try to reduce those high glycemic index carbohydrates to just 2, preferably after the workout and in the dinner. And the number of meals as well needs to be reduced. So if you are starting with 5 currently, try with just 3. That will certainly help your body to recover from that insulin problem it has. If you want to go even deeper, you can just go with 2 meals a day. If you see that's a sort of intermittent fasting, because when we do not eat, we are promoting the hormones that are hyperglycemic. So the ratio we have is going to rebalance itself because we had a lot of insulin, because we have insulin in our blood even in a fasted state, and low to little glucagon and cortisol and those hormones. So by eating less frequently and less carbohydrates in every meal, you're starting to decrease the insulin levels, the insulin production, and to raise the hypoglycemic hormones, and that's going to restore the proper ratio between them, the balance between them. That's very important. And bit by bit, by trying even intermittent fasting, if you are into it, you can achieve this even quicker. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you understood the main concept I explained, and if you have any doubts, just write them down below in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel to get notified every time I upload a new content. Like this video if you want, share to friends and family, and I see you in the next one. Ciao!